After being burned by a hot cup of coffee, I realized I wasn't just physically hurt, but pushed out of my own life. It was a quiet morning, the kind I'd hoped would stay peaceful. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my son Daniel's home, my fingers wrapped around a warm mug of coffee. The kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee just the way Daniel liked it. He always made it strong, but today it didn't bother me. I was content. I could hear the faint hum of the morning, the sunlight spilling through the windows and casting a soft glow over the worn oak table. The sound of the birds outside was the perfect soundtrack to my thoughts. I should have known better than to think it would last. Jake, my grandson, was sitting nearby, his attention focused on his phone, scrolling through something. After a few moments of silence, he casually turned to me and asked Grandma, "Can I borrow your credit card again? I need to buy something for my gaming setup. It's only $4,000. I blinked. Only $4,000. My heart sank as the words registered. "Jake, I can't do that." I replied, my voice steady, but tinged with disbelief. I had never been asked for such a large sum of money before, and I couldn't bring myself to understand why it was suddenly an expectation. The room fell quiet for a moment, an awkward silence hanging between us. I looked at Daniel, hoping he might intervene, or at least offer some understanding. Instead, his eyes narrowed, and his face grew tense. I could feel the shift in the air, the pressure, the unspoken tension building up between us. Daniel had always been the loving son, the one who made sure I was comfortable, the one who reassured me I wasn't a burden. But now, something was different. He didn't speak right away, but I could see it in his eyes. Something had changed. Then in a move I couldn't have expected, Daniel snapped. Without warning, he reached over and knocked the mug from my hands. It felt like time had slowed down as the coffee flew in an arc through the air, splashing across my lap in an agonizing burn. I gasped, scrambling to stand up, the hot liquid searing through my thin pajama pants. The mug shattered on the floor, a jagged ceramic sound that echoed through the kitchen. I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling from the shock. I could hardly comprehend what had just happened, but I knew deep down that this wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a message. And as I looked into Daniel's eyes, I realized the truth: he didn't see me anymore. Not as his mother, not as someone he cared for, but as a resource, a means to an end. The love was gone, replaced by something colder. Something I couldn't quite name, but I knew it when I saw it. "Mom," he said, his voice flat, emotionless, "if you're going to be selfish, then maybe it's time you leave." The words hit me harder than the coffee, and in that moment I understood. I wasn't welcome here, not for who I was, but for what I could offer. And that was a hard pill to swallow. I stood there trembling, the sharp sting of the coffee still lingering on my skin. My mind was racing, but everything around me seemed so still, so distant. The sharp smell of the burnt coffee lingered in the air, almost suffocating me, and I stared at the broken pieces of the mug scattered across the floor. There, in the midst of the wreckage, I realized something: my relationship with Daniel, with my own son, had shifted in a way I hadn't seen coming. The days after that incident in the kitchen felt like a blur. Daniel didn't apologize. He didn't even seem to acknowledge the severity of what had happened. It was as if the whole thing had been an afterthought for him. And me? Well, I had no choice but to keep quiet, to bite my tongue. I couldn't bring myself to challenge him again, not after the way he'd looked at me, not after the way he'd dismissed my worth in that one cold statement. Either hand over the card or leave. The following days were a cruel reminder of how things had changed. I'd come to Daniel's home after my surgery, a temporary arrangement, he had said. A temporary arrangement that quickly felt like a trap. I remember when I first moved in after my hip replacement. I couldn't walk without help, and Daniel had insisted I stay with them. "It'll be easier for you," he'd said. "We'll take care of everything. You can rest, Mom." I had been grateful, of course, stupidly so. Grateful for their help. Grateful that I didn't have to deal with the stress of managing my own life after surgery. But in hindsight, I see it now. The strings were there from the start, always tied around my ankles, pulling me further into a web of dependency I hadn't seen coming. And the worst part was, I didn't realize it was happening until it was too late. At first, I was content in a way. I didn't have to worry about anything. Daniel handled my medications, the grocery shopping, the bills. But over time, as I began to feel better, I noticed something subtle but alarming. It wasn't just care that Daniel was offering. No, it was control. Little things at first, but they grew more and more obvious as time passed. One day I found myself locked out of my own bank account. Daniel had taken it upon himself to set up automatic payments for my bills. He said it was just to make things easier for me, but I had no idea that my bank account, the one I'd kept for years, was now under his watch. The transactions were going through his account, and I wasn't allowed to see the details. When I questioned him about it, he brushed it off. "You don't need to worry about it, Mom. I'm handling everything for you," he had said almost dismissively. And the worst part, I let him. I was too tired, too worn out from the surgery and the constant demands of life to argue. So I let him handle it, trusting that he was doing what was best for me. But in the quiet corners of my mind, doubts began to fester. Why was I no longer allowed to make my own decisions? Why did I have to rely on Daniel for everything? I began to feel like a prisoner in my own home, and worse yet, I began to feel like I wasn't even seen as a person anymore. I wasn't Emily, his mother. I was just a project. A person to be managed, a person to be dealt with. He made decisions for me, he took control of my life, and he did it all under the guise of helping. But what was this really? Was this love? Or was it just him tightening the grip of control, making sure I didn't escape? The turning point came when I overheard a conversation between Daniel and his wife, Lisa. I wasn't supposed to be listening, but I couldn't help myself. They were in the living room, and I was walking by when I heard Lisa ask, "Is she really going to keep fighting us over this? We've been paying for everything, her bills, her prescriptions. What more does she want?" Daniel's voice came next, sounding calm, almost too calm. "She needs to understand. I'm doing this for her. She doesn't know what's best for her anymore. She's just being stubborn." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. It was the first time I truly understood how Daniel saw me, not as a mother, not as someone he loved, but as an inconvenience, a burden. His calm demeanor, his detached tone, made it clear that my well-being was no longer a priority to him. It wasn't about taking care of me anymore. It was about maintaining control, keeping me dependent on him for everything. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I'd been relying on Daniel, yes, but not because he was doing it out of love. He was doing it out of necessity, his necessity, not mine. I had become a pawn in his game, a tool for his own comfort. And that realization was the hardest thing I had ever faced. It crushed me. How had I not seen it sooner? How had I let myself become so blinded by gratitude, by the illusion of care, that I didn't realize what was happening to me? The tipping point came the day after the coffee incident. I had been walking through the living room when I saw Daniel casually talking to Travis, his eyes flicking over to me, then quickly looking away when I caught his gaze. It was then that I knew Daniel had no intention of treating me with kindness. His kindness was just a means to an end, and I was no longer useful to him. Not as a person, but as a resource. He no longer cared about my comfort, my happiness, or even my health. All that mattered was how much I could contribute to his needs. And that was when I decided I had enough. I didn't say anything to him that day. I didn't argue. Instead, I turned and walked away. But inside, I was making a promise to myself. I would not let him control me any longer. I would not be a prisoner in my own life, at the mercy of someone who only saw me as a tool for his convenience. I started packing my things that very night. I didn't make a sound. I didn't need to. My silence spoke louder than any words could. I was done. And while the burn on my lap still stung, the deeper pain was the realization that I was being discarded, no longer seen as a mother, no longer a person of worth, but a burden. I couldn't change that, but I could walk away. And I did. Daniel may have thought he had control over me, but he was wrong. I was reclaiming my life, and I was doing it on my terms, and nothing, not even my own son, could take that away from me. The silence in the house was deafening in the days following the incident in the kitchen. Daniel didn't speak to me much, and when he did, it was always with a certain coldness that left no room for affection. It was as though the warm bond we once had was gone, replaced with an emptiness that neither of us knew how to fill. Lisa, too, acted as if nothing had happened. She went about her day-to-day routine, never once offering a word of comfort or even a glance of remorse. They acted as though the hot coffee incident was nothing but a minor inconvenience, something that could be swept under the rug and forgotten. But I couldn't forget. Every time I moved, every step I took, the burn on my lap reminded me of what had truly happened. It wasn't the coffee that hurt the most, nor the physical pain. It was the realization that my son, the person who should have been my rock, had discarded me. I had spent years helping him, supporting him, loving him unconditionally. And yet when I needed something in return, all I received was indifference and manipulation. The worst part was that I had let it happen. I had allowed myself to become a burden in his eyes, something to be managed, something that was no longer useful. The thought of staying in that house under those conditions was unbearable. My own son had reduced me to an inconvenience, a problem to be solved. I wasn't even a mother to him anymore. I was just another responsibility, a person to be controlled. And that was when the truth finally hit me with full force. Daniel didn't love me. He never did, not in the way I had thought. He didn't see me as someone to be cared for or cherished. I was just another thing to be dealt with, another thing to manipulate for his own gain. I couldn't stay there any longer. The house, once filled with memories and warmth, now felt like a prison. I walked through the rooms, each one reminding me of a different chapter of my life, good times, moments of joy, but now overshadowed by betrayal. I knew it was time to go, to take back control of my life. That night, while Daniel and Lisa were out, I quietly started packing my things. It was a strange feeling. Part of me was numb. The other part was brimming with emotions I couldn't fully express. The physical act of packing was simple, but the emotions that came with it were overwhelming. Each item I folded and placed into my suitcase felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, yet another piece of myself that I was reclaiming. It wasn't just about leaving the house. It was about leaving behind the role I had played in their lives for far too long. The role of the person they could control, the person who would always bend to their will. I didn't make a sound as I packed. I didn't want to alert them. The decision to leave was mine, and I wasn't going to ask for permission. It was the first time in months, maybe even years, that I was doing something entirely for myself, and the power of that realization took me by surprise. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also liberating. I wasn't just leaving a house. I was leaving the emotional baggage that had weighed me down for far too long. The next morning, after packing my clothes and personal items, I called Michael. He was an old friend of mine, a retired lawyer, and someone who had always looked out for me. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but something told me that now, more than ever, I needed his advice. Michael had always been a voice of reason, and I trusted him. When he answered the phone, his voice was warm and familiar, the way it had always been. "Emily, it's been a long time," he said. "What's going on?" "I need help, Michael," I said, my voice trembling. I don't know who else to turn to. He didn't ask questions right away. He just listened, and as I told him everything about Daniel, about the way I had been treated, about the realization that I could no longer stay under their roof, he didn't interrupt. He simply let me speak. And by the time I finished, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my chest. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about standing up for myself, about taking control of my life again. "You're doing the right thing, Emily," he said softly, his voice filled with kindness. "You deserve better than this. You deserve to be treated with respect. Let's take the next step." Michael offered to help me with the legal side of things to make sure that I wasn't leaving myself vulnerable. He promised that he would help me protect my assets and my rights, especially now that I was aware of the financial abuse that had been happening behind my back. That was all I needed to hear. I didn't need to overthink it anymore. The time had come. It was time for me to leave to reclaim my independence. I called a local senior living community that I had heard about a few months earlier. Willow Ridge was a place I had considered in passing, but it always felt too far out of reach. Now it seemed like my only option. The person on the other end of the line was kind and understanding. She didn't ask me too many questions. She simply gave me the information I needed and assured me that a space was available for me if I decided to move in. And that was it. The decision had been made. I was going to leave. I wasn't going to stay in a place where I wasn't wanted. I wasn't going to let my son dictate the terms of my life any longer. Packing up my things and calling Michael was just the beginning. The real journey was about to begin, one of reclaiming my sense of self, of rebuilding my independence, and of finally living on my own terms. When Daniel and Lisa returned home that afternoon, I was ready. My suitcase was by the door, and I had made my peace with the fact that I was leaving. I wasn't going to fight them anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to explain. I walked out the door, leaving everything behind. The house, the people, the life I had known, it was all behind me now. And as the door closed behind me, I realized something. I wasn't walking away from my family. I was walking towards something far more important, myself. And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also freeing. I had reclaimed my life, and nothing, not even my own son, could take that away from me. The day I left Daniel's house was both the hardest and the most liberating day of my life. As I drove away, leaving behind the place that had once been home, my heart felt heavy. Yet there was a lightness in my chest, a feeling I hadn't had in years. I was on my own now, no longer under the roof of someone who saw me as a burden, but as someone who was starting to understand her own worth again. Willow Ridge was only a short drive from Daniel's house, but it might as well have been a world away. It was everything I had been longing for and more. The moment I pulled into the parking lot, I could see that this was no ordinary senior living community. The grounds were beautifully maintained with lush gardens and winding pathways. There were fountains, benches scattered along the walkways, and even a koi pond that shimmered in the sunlight. It looked peaceful, serene, exactly the kind of place I had been dreaming about since I had left my old life behind. When I entered the lobby, I was greeted by a warm smile from the receptionist, a woman named Laya, who had a calm, reassuring presence. She handed me a brochure and a set of keys to my new apartment. Everything about the place felt right. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I wasn't just existing, I was living again. I moved into my small but cozy apartment, which had everything I needed. The room was bright with windows that let in the morning sunlight and a balcony that overlooked the garden. It was everything I could have wanted. For the first time in months, I felt like I had my own space, a space where I could breathe and make decisions for myself without fear of being controlled. But it wasn't just the apartment that made Willow Ridge special. It was the people. From the other residents to the staff, everyone I encountered made me feel welcomed, respected, and valued. There was no judgment, no expectation of what I should or shouldn't do. It was a place where I could just be me again. No one asked me about my past. They didn't care about my family drama or the mess I had left behind. They simply saw me as Emily, a person worthy of respect, with a life ahead of her, not just a story of old age and regret. One of the first things I did when I settled in was reach out to Michael. His voice was a lifeline, and I knew that if I was going to protect myself from further manipulation, I needed his expertise. He had been my friend for years, and now he was my ally in this fight for my independence. I called him the morning after I moved into Willow Ridge, and we scheduled a time to meet so he could help me take the next steps in securing my future. Michael arrived at Willow Ridge the following week. He was just as kind and thoughtful as I remembered, and it was clear that he understood the weight of what I was going through. We sat down in my new apartment, and I shared everything with him: my financial situation, the fact that Daniel had been controlling my accounts, and the emotional toll it had all taken on me. Michael listened without interruption, and when I finished speaking, he nodded, his expression serious. "We're going to make sure you're protected," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You deserve peace, Emily. You've been through enough, and it's time for you to take control of your finances again." Over the next few weeks, Michael guided me through the steps I needed to take to ensure that Daniel could no longer access my accounts or manipulate my finances. We started by freezing my bank accounts, which was a crucial move. Daniel had been making withdrawals without my knowledge, using my name to purchase things, and I knew that if I didn't act fast, he would continue to drain my resources. The bank was cooperative, and they helped us put a freeze on all my accounts, ensuring that no transactions could go through without my approval. We also filed a financial protection order, which would give me legal protection from any future attempts by Daniel to access my money or property. The legal process was complicated and at times overwhelming, but with Michael's help, it felt manageable. I had always trusted Michael's judgment, and his calm demeanor gave me the confidence I needed to push forward. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally taking control of my own life. The more I learned about the steps I could take to protect myself, the more empowered I felt. I began to realize that I had allowed myself to be manipulated for far too long, and it was time to stop. Daniel had thought he could control me, that I would always rely on him, but I had broken free, and now I had the tools to make sure he could never hurt me again. As Michael and I worked through the legal process, I also started to focus on rebuilding my life. The sense of freedom I had felt when I left Daniel's house was starting to settle in, and it was becoming clear that I had much more ahead of me than I had realized. Willow Ridge was more than just a place to live. It was a new beginning. It offered me the chance to rediscover myself, to find new purpose in the things I loved. I started to engage with the other residents, joining in the social activities that Willow Ridge offered. I participated in book clubs, gardening sessions, and even a weekly yoga class. The sense of community here was something I had never experienced before. For so long, I had been isolated in my own home, surrounded by people who only saw me as a burden. Now I was surrounded by people who respected me, who wanted to be around me, and who valued my presence. As weeks turned into months, I found myself growing stronger, both mentally and emotionally. I began to feel a sense of peace that I had never thought was possible. I was no longer weighed down by the constant anxiety of living under someone else's control. I had my own space, my own routine, and most importantly, I had my independence back. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden at Willow Ridge watching the koi swim lazily in the pond, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when I felt like giving up, but every step I had taken, every decision I made to reclaim my life, had brought me to this moment. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The support from Michael had been invaluable, and I knew I could always count on him if I needed anything in the future. But more than that, I realized something even more important. I had become my own advocate. I had learned how to protect myself, how to stand up for myself, and how to take control of my own destiny. And as I watched the sun set over the horizon that evening, I smiled to myself, knowing that I had finally reclaimed my life. As the days passed at Willow Ridge, I found myself settling into a routine, one that finally felt like my own. For the first time in months, or maybe even years, I woke up each morning without the cloud of worry hanging over me. The financial abuse I had suffered under Daniel's control still lingered in the back of my mind, but I was learning how to live again, how to breathe, without fear of being taken advantage of. But then a single phone call from Michael changed everything. He had been helping me with the legal steps necessary to reclaim my life. But one afternoon, as we were talking about the next steps in securing my finances, he asked me to double-check some of my old bank statements. It was an odd request, but one that felt important. Just to be thorough, he had said, we need to make sure everything is in order before we proceed. I had been reluctant to dig too deep into the past, but I knew that Michael was right. If I was going to truly protect myself, I needed to confront what Daniel had done. I pulled out the stack of old bank statements that had accumulated over the years. They were from before I had moved in with Daniel, from before everything had started to unravel. The statements were a collection of simple transactions bills, paid occasional withdrawals, nothing that seemed unusual at first glance. But as I flipped through the pages, something caught my eye. There were withdrawals I didn't recognize. Large sums of money had been taken from my account amounts that I knew I hadn't authorized. I stared at the numbers, feeling my pulse quicken. These weren't just small purchases. These were substantial withdrawals money that had been taken under my name without my knowledge or consent. I began to feel the familiar pang of dread that I had been suppressing for so long. My hands shook as I reached for the next statement and then the next. It wasn't just the withdrawals, it was the forgeries. Daniel had been signing my name, making it look like I had authorized these transactions, when in reality I had no idea they were happening. The anger I felt was overwhelming, but I knew that I needed to stay calm. I had to be careful. I called Michael immediately. I found something, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I think Daniel's been taking money from my account, and he's forged my signature. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then Michael's steady voice came through. Emily, this is exactly why we've been taking these steps. We need to document everything, every single transaction, and we need to make sure you have proof of what's been happening. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. It was as if the fog I had been living in for so long was starting to clear. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't overreacting. Daniel had been stealing from me, manipulating me, and using my trust against me. It was hard to admit, but it was undeniable now. Over the next few weeks, Michael and I worked together to gather evidence. I pulled every statement I could find, every email, every record of a transaction. I started keeping a journal documenting the dates and amounts of the unauthorized withdrawals. Michael guided me through every step of the process, helping me build a case that would protect my future and expose the financial abuse that had been going on right under my nose. The more I uncovered, the more the magnitude of what Daniel had done hit me. I had spent years blindly trusting him, and now I was faced with the harsh reality that he had been siphoning off my savings, forging my name, and using my money for his own purposes. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. But as the days went by, I began to realize something else. This wasn't just about the money. This was about taking back control of my life, about refusing to let him treat me as if I was his property. It was then that Michael suggested creating an irrevocable living trust. He explained that it would be the best way to protect my home, my assets, and my future from any further attempts by Daniel to take what was mine. An irrevocable living trust would ensure that my property could not be transferred without my knowledge, and it would safeguard my assets from being manipulated or stolen. It would give me the security I needed to know that my future was safe, no matter what Daniel might try. At first, the idea of creating a trust felt daunting. I didn't fully understand what it meant, and the thought of making such a significant legal decision was intimidating. But Michael walked me through it step by step, helping me see how important it was to take this next step toward reclaiming my independence. We spent hours discussing the details, how the trust would work, what assets I would include, and how it would protect me from any future legal battles. Michael made sure I understood every aspect of the process, and together we filled out the paperwork to create the trust. It was a powerful feeling signing those documents. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. But the trust wasn't the only thing we needed to do. Michael also recommended that I arrange for a property evaluation. Daniel had managed to get the title to my home, transferred into his name under the pretense of helping with medical paperwork during my surgery. It was something I hadn't noticed at the time, but now in hindsight, I realized how carefully Daniel had orchestrated the entire thing. He had thought that I wouldn't catch on, that I wouldn't notice how he had slowly but surely taken everything from me. I needed to know what my home was worth, especially since Daniel had managed to transfer the title into his name. I didn't trust him anymore, and I certainly didn't trust the situation. So Michael arranged for a real estate agent to evaluate the property, making sure that the value of the house was assessed independently of Daniel's influence. The agent arrived a few days later, and as she walked through the house, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. As the agent took notes and measured the rooms, I felt a glimmer of hope. This was the beginning of something new. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I wasn't going to let Daniel take my home, my savings, or my peace of mind. By the time the evaluation was complete, I had taken the necessary steps to protect everything I held dear. The trust was in place, my property was secure, and I had the legal backing I needed to ensure that Daniel could no longer manipulate or abuse me financially. The process wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And as I sat in my apartment at Willow Ridge, surrounded by the peace and quiet I had fought so hard to reclaim, I knew that I had done everything I could to protect myself. Daniel had thought he could control me. He had thought he could take what was mine without consequences. But he was wrong. This was my life, and I was the one in control now. The legal battle wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. I had the strength, the support, and the tools to fight for my future. And for the first time in years, I felt truly empowered. A few weeks after I'd taken the necessary steps to secure my future, the phone call came. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I knew immediately who it was the moment I heard the voice on the other end. It was Daniel. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice was strained, tinged with a quiet desperation I hadn't heard in years. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. I was wrong, okay? I didn't mean for things to go this far. I didn't realize how much this was affecting you. I didn't respond right away." My mind was racing, trying to process the situation. The calm, controlled tone of his voice contrasted sharply with the anger I'd seen in him that day in the kitchen. The day he had knocked the coffee mug from my hands and treated me like an inconvenience. "You didn't realize," I repeated quietly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "Daniel, you've been treating me like a problem to solve, not a mother. You've been stealing from me, forging my name, and manipulating me for months. And now you want to apologize?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing the weight of the situation hanging between us. Finally, he spoke again, his tone softer now. "Look, I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fix this. You're my mom, and I want you to come home. We'll make things right. I miss you." I clenched my jaw, the hurt still fresh, still raw. But I refused to let him manipulate me again. Not this time. Not after everything that had happened. I had learned the hard way that love, if it ever existed between us, was always conditional. It was a love that came with strings, with expectations, with control. It wasn't a love that saw me for who I truly was. It was a love that used me. "Daniel, I've already made my decision. I'm not coming back," I said firmly, my voice unwavering. "You need to understand that. I'm not a burden, and I'm not something for you to control. I'm living my life now, and I'm not going to let you pull me back into the toxic mess you created." There was another pause, and then his voice came through laced with frustration and anger. "You're being unreasonable, Mom. Do you think I don't care? You really think I want you gone? I'm trying to fix things, but you're pushing me away. This is what you wanted, isn't it? You just wanted me to fail. You want me to feel guilty." His words hit me hard, but not in the way he intended. The guilt, the manipulation, the twisted blame, all of it came flooding back, and I knew in that moment that nothing had changed. He hadn't changed. He wasn't sorry. He was angry that I had escaped his grasp. He was angry that I had found the strength to leave and build a life outside of his control. "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty, Daniel," I said, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. "I'm simply telling you the truth. You've used me. You've controlled me for too long, and I've let you. But that ends now. I've worked too hard to get here to reclaim my independence. I'm not going to let you manipulate me into thinking I need to come back." He didn't say anything for a long moment. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in years, I felt no fear. I was standing my ground, no longer the woman I had been, before the woman who put everyone else's needs above her own. I was Emily, a woman who was reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her peace. "I'm not going to beg you," Mom Daniel finally said, his voice cold now. "But don't expect me to be here when you change your mind. You'll regret this." And just like that, he hung up. The silence that followed was deafening, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that comes with finality, with closure. I felt no regret, no second thoughts. For so long, I had been the one to beg, the one to apologize, the one to make excuses for Daniel's behavior. But not anymore. I was done. The next few days were oddly peaceful. Daniel's call was the final piece of the puzzle, the last attempt to reel me back in. It had been everything I feared it would be, a desperate attempt to guilt me into returning to a life I knew I didn't belong in. But I had seen through it. I had seen through the false apologies, the empty promises, the manipulation disguised as love. I was no longer the woman who would take that abuse. I had fought too hard to get where I was now, to let him tear me down again. Life at Willow Ridge was everything I needed. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The people here respected me not for what I could give them, but for who I was. They valued me for my experiences, for the wisdom I had gathered over the years. I was no longer the person people walked all over. I was respected, valued, and most importantly, I was free. But as peaceful as things were, there were moments when the old guilt would creep in. I would be sitting in the garden watching the koi swim lazily in the pond, and I'd wonder if I had done the right thing. I'd wonder if I had been too harsh on Daniel, too quick to walk away. But then I'd remind myself of everything that had happened, of the years of manipulation, of the control, of the constant feeling that I wasn't enough. And I knew deep down that I had made the right decision. Daniel's final attempt to pull me back had been his last chance. It wasn't a plea for reconciliation. It was an attempt to maintain control, to make me feel small, to make me feel guilty for finally standing up for myself. But he had failed. His last desperate grasp at my life was nothing more than a reminder of why I had left in the first place. I was no longer intimidated by him, and I was no longer afraid to stand on my own. The guilt, the manipulation, the lies had all washed away piece by piece with each passing day. I was building a new life, one that was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone, especially Daniel, take that away from me. So I focused on the things that mattered now. I made new friends at Willow Ridge, started new hobbies, and most importantly, I took care of myself. I didn't look back anymore. I didn't need to. And with that, I found a peace that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The weeks that followed Daniel's final attempt to manipulate me were some of the quietest of my life. Willow Ridge, with its peaceful surroundings and the soothing rhythm of daily routines, became my sanctuary. I no longer lived in the shadow of his control, no longer felt the weight of guilt hanging over me for making decisions that were meant to protect myself. The silence in my new life was not the absence of noise, but the presence of freedom, a silence that told me I was finally in charge of my own destiny. But even as I began to settle into my new life, a part of me knew that I couldn't fully heal until I had exposed the truth about Daniel's behavior. I couldn't simply move on and forget. It was a matter of justice, of standing up for myself and reclaiming what he had stolen from me, not just my money, but my peace of mind, my dignity, and my independence. I had gathered enough evidence to build a strong case. Michael, my trusted friend and lawyer, had been invaluable in helping me put everything together. The documents, the bank statements, the records of the unauthorized withdrawals, all of it painted a clear picture of the financial abuse Daniel had been inflicting on me. For years I had been blind to it, trapped by my own love and loyalty. But now the truth was undeniable. One afternoon, as I sat on my apartment's balcony watching the sunlight reflect off the koi pond below, I made the decision to take the next step. It was time to take the evidence to the authorities. I needed to ensure that Daniel faced the consequences of his actions, not just for me, but for anyone else who might fall victim to his manipulation in the future. The system had to know what he had done. The truth needed to be exposed, no matter how painful or difficult it might be. With Michael's help, I contacted the local authorities. I gathered all the evidence, bank statements, forged signatures, transaction records, and submitted everything I had. The authorities were quick to act, and soon an investigation was underway. The process wasn't easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But each time I thought about Daniel, about the way he had treated me, I knew I had no other choice. The investigation took weeks, but eventually I received a call from Michael. He had spoken to the investigators, and they confirmed that Daniel was under investigation for financial misconduct, including elder financial abuse and forgery. I sat in my apartment, the phone pressed to my ear as the words sank in. Daniel would be held accountable for what he had done. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long started to lift, replaced by a feeling of peace I hadn't known in years. For so long I had been afraid of confronting the truth, afraid of what it might mean for my family, afraid of the consequences. But now that the investigation had begun, I felt a sense of closure starting to settle in. The truth was out there, and Daniel could no longer hide behind the walls of manipulation and control that he had so carefully built. I couldn't help but think about all the times I had excused his behavior, all the times I had ignored the warning signs. He had convinced me that he was the one looking out for me, that he was the one who knew what was best. I had believed him because I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the son I had raised with so much love and care would never hurt me. But the truth was that I had been a pawn in his game for far too long. Now I could finally breathe again. As the investigation progressed, I found myself thinking less and less about Daniel, less about the pain and manipulation he had put me through. I no longer feared his anger or his attempts to guilt me into submission. The fear that had once kept me trapped was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence I had never known before. One evening, as I walked through the gardens at Willow Ridge, I paused by a bench, feeling the cool evening air on my face. The sense of calm was overwhelming. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, worried about what might happen next. I wasn't waiting for Daniel to call to demand something from me, to guilt-trip me into feeling responsible for him. I had broken free from his control, and with each passing day, I felt more and more liberated. I was no longer a victim of his manipulation. I was no longer a part of his twisted game. I had taken my life back, and the peace that came with that decision was like nothing I had ever experienced. The legal process wasn't over, and there were still steps to be taken, but I had already won in so many ways. I had won my independence. I had won my dignity. And most importantly, I had won back my life. It wasn't just the legal consequences that brought me peace. It was the simple realization that I had taken control of my own story. For so long, I had allowed Daniel to dictate the terms of my life. But now I was the one calling the shots. I was the one who made the decisions, who decided what was best for me. And that sense of autonomy, that sense of ownership over my own life, was something I had been searching for a long time. The investigation into Daniel's misconduct was a long and drawn-out process, but as time passed, I began to notice the changes within myself. I was no longer weighed down by the constant worry, the constant fear of his control. I could finally breathe freely, knowing that I had taken the necessary steps to protect myself. As I sat in my apartment looking out over the gardens at Willow Ridge, I realized that I had come so far. The woman I was before, afraid, manipulated, controlled, was no longer the woman I was today. I had fought for my freedom, and I had won. And now I could finally begin to live my life on my own terms. I no longer feared Daniel's threats or manipulations. I no longer felt obligated to explain myself or justify my actions. I was at peace, and that peace came from knowing that I had done what was necessary to reclaim my independence and protect my future. And as the days went on, I felt more and more confident in the life I had built for myself at Willow Ridge. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden to anyone. I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone else to take care of me. I was taking care of myself, and that was all I needed. Daniel had tried to break me to control me, but in the end, he had failed. I had come out stronger, more independent, and more at peace with myself than I had ever been. And no matter what happened next in the legal battle, I knew one thing for sure: I had already won. I had taken back my life, and nothing could take that away from me. As the days passed, the weight that had once held me down slowly began to lift. I had severed ties with Daniel not out of bitterness, but because I had finally come to understand my own worth. I no longer saw myself as someone who needed to apologize for wanting peace, for wanting control over my own life. The years of manipulation, guilt, and control had taught me one powerful lesson: I was deserving of more than that. I was deserving of respect, of love, and of a life lived on my own terms. When I made the decision to walk away from Daniel, I did so with a quiet strength that I hadn't known I possessed. I wasn't angry, nor did I harbor resentment. Instead, I embraced the reality that I no longer needed to explain myself to anyone. I had given Daniel years of my love and care, and I had done so selflessly, but in the end, he had failed to see me for who I truly was: a mother, a person of value, and someone who deserved to live with dignity. Now I was free to create the life I wanted, to follow my own path, and to make decisions based on what was best for me. The freedom that came with that realization was indescribable. There was no more fear of his manipulation, no more guilt tripping, no more feeling like I had to justify my choices to anyone. As I sat in my apartment at Willow Ridge, I often found myself reflecting on the journey I had been on. I thought about how far I had come from being trapped in a web of control to standing firmly on my own 2 feet. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Every step, every decision had brought me closer to the woman I was meant to be. I also realized that silence, the quiet strength that came with refusing to engage with Daniel's manipulation, had been one of my most powerful tools. It wasn't the shouting matches or the long arguments that had brought me peace. It was the quiet decision to walk away, to stop engaging, to simply live my life without letting him take up any more space in it. And in that silence, I found my true power. I was no longer a victim of his control. I was Emily, and I was free. What we see in Emily's journey is not just a personal battle against manipulation and control. It's a reflection of the societal norms that often encourage us to put others before ourselves, to suppress our own needs in the name of family, love, or duty. How many of us, especially as we age, find ourselves feeling as though we should be self-sacrificial simply because we've been conditioned to believe that caring for others means neglecting our own well-being. The truth is, no matter who you are or how much you've given, you deserve respect and the freedom to live your life on your own terms. Emily's decision to walk away from a relationship where she had been used as a resource rather than loved for who she truly is reminds us that we must take responsibility for our own happiness. We mustn't let fear or guilt keep us bound to situations that diminish our worth. I believe that we all deserve to live freely, to be respected, and to make choices that nourish our well-being. This means learning to say no when necessary, setting boundaries, and recognizing when love becomes manipulation. Emily's story isn't just about standing up for yourself, it's about reclaiming your life. If this story resonates with you, I urge you to reflect on your own relationships. Are there places in your life where you're letting guilt or manipulation control you? It's time to break free from those chains. Let's embrace our own strength and live our truth. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. If this story spoke to you, make sure to check out the other videos on this channel. There's so much more to explore, and you won't want to miss it.